In this video we're going to learn about the selection tool, that is the direct selection tool and the selection tool, and a bunch of different techniques you can use to select and move things around the screen. Okay, you'll start by seeing that in the toolbar the top left hand button is the mouse icon. There's another mouse icon right next to it. The one that's selected at the moment is the selection tool, and using that you can select geometries by themselves. So if I were to select this line here, I'll just zoom in on it by clicking on the geometry, and if I zoom out and click and drag, you can draw a marquee box which will select everything sitting inside that box. Now if I only select a proportion of the geometries, you'll notice even that this line wasn't entirely inside that marquee box, it was still selected. Anything that touches the marquee box will be selected. Alternatively, the direct selection tool, will select direct paths within a group of compound paths. So if I, for example, want to select an individual point on a path, a control point, I can do that with a direct selection tool. Whereas if I use the standard selection tool, I will only be able to select the geometry as a whole. It's rather difficult to show the exact differences between the two at this point. However, for path editing you will nearly always use the direct selection tool, and for transforming and moving geometries generally you will use the selection tool. Obviously there's other scenarios where both can be applied, but for the moment that's all you'll need to know. Underneath those two tools I just showed you, you'll see the Magic Wand tool and the Lasso tool. The Magic Wand tool, if you've ever used Photoshop, it's very similar. It will select things within a object's geometries, fills, line weights within a certain tolerance. So if I were to select this line here, although this geometry is separate to this geometry, they're very similar, so it will select them automatically. And the same if I were to select fills. These fills are in close proximity and very similar in property and character, therefore they will also be selected. If you double click on the Magic Wand, there we go, it'll bring up a small window, a small palette that enables us to check whether we want fill color to be considered or not, and the tolerance. So 20, it's at 20% at the moment. If you move that up and down, it will impact the how, say, for example, close a color would need to be to the color you've selected for it to be selected as well. The Lasso tool is basically a freehand drawn marquee which enables you to select things within the marquee, and just like the marquee that you'll draw with the selection tool, anything that touches the marquee will also be selected. So if I were to just select things like that, we'll find that we only get these geometries selected. Okay, now what I'm going to show you next are a few of the options from the select menu which make selecting objects and manipulating existing line weights that you may have imported into your project extremely easy. So I'll just zoom out for the moment so we can see the drawing here. Okay. So if I were to say, for example, get my direct selection tool, zoom into a particular line weight, and this is a broken geometry, and you'll find out how to fix that later when we learn the drawing tools. I'll select this line just so you can see that it is a line, and I want to select all lines with a similar line weight. Say for example if I imported my drawing from AutoCAD and I already had all my line weights attributed to layers, for example 0.3 millimeters for for the foreground detail and 0.1 for background, and I wanted to select all of them and make them slightly thicker or smaller. If I was rescaling the whole drawing, I would select the line, I'd go up to select, I would go select same, and then either appearance, blending mode, fill and stroke. I'll go with stroke weight for the moment because it fits with the example I was talking about before, and you'll notice that all the strokes with the same weight have also been selected. Now you'll be thinking, wait a minute, this line up here is a bit thicker, but it's a character of the messy vector PDFs that some CAD programs generate. There'll be several lines sitting behind this, and not all of them are the ones that we want. So there'll be a thin line behind a thick line. It's just part of the nature of some of these drawings, and we can work around that. You'll find out a few tricks of how to do that later on. Going back to the select menu at the moment, you can save your selection. So if I click on save selection, and we call it selection 1 and click OK, then if we select off that, we can go back to select, click down in selection 1, and it grabs the same selection. Very useful if you want to edit the same bunch of objects several times. I'll go back up to select, next object above and below. Just if in case you haven't understood the object hierarchy so far, objects are either in front or behind each other, and you'll learn when it comes to transforming and arranging objects how you can move objects in front and behind as though they were sheets of paper stacked on a table. So if you wanted to select the object directly underneath another object, you would use these two options, and the shortcuts Alt, Control and right bracket or left bracket. To see whether an object is on top or below another object, you can look at the layers palette, and we'll look at that in a future video. Now if I were to select this line and say, well actually I want every other line except this one selected, or every other object apart from that one selected, I could use select inverse, and you'll see everything is now selected apart from that line. All on active artboard, so if we had one artboard and we didn't want to select anything on the other artboard, or if we just want to select everything in the project. So a few different options there that make it quite useful. I won't go into too much more detail, but the different options for the same and object menu drop downs in the select menu provide some extremely useful options, so have a play with them yourself. And if you're trying to find an option you think that logically should exist given the other functions of the program, it's more than likely to be here. Just have a look around and a play with these different options. Now for the sake of consolidating a few of the skills we've learnt, I will just copy this imported geometry here by getting my selection tool, dragging a marquee around them, and copying the artwork to a drawing that I have previously created. So I'm going to go up to Edit and Copy. This is a new skill, so we haven't looked at this yet, but will be addressed in more depth in a future video. And the shortcut for that is Control C in Windows. I'll go to my new A1, so that's 894 by 597 document, and I will go Control V, or you can go up to Edit, Paste, and you'll see the different paste options that we'll look in another video, and it drops the artwork onto the canvas. From there I can use my basic transformations, which you'll learn in a future video. I'll do quickly now, and get them to the right size, and then I can use my selection marquee to quickly delete by pressing the delete key this unnecessary artwork around the side, and then go into View and Fit All in Window. I can now see the copied and rotated artwork.